So there's a massive shift coming across the whole world. Everybody's talking about it. Going to be a major change in finances, but it's different this time. It's not just inflation and a recession and maybe a depression, but the entire financial system, the way that currency is done, the way that banking is done, the way that finances are done, it's going to change at a fundamental level. Coupling all of these things that we see going on in the world, wars and rumors of wars, inflation, famine, shortages, and famine coming especially first in the countries and areas that are usually the hardest hit by famine. And, geopolitical events that are described in the Bible are seemingly lining up as never before. And so as we look at the world, we see a time of darkness and chaos slowly descending onto the planet on a global basis as we speak. Now, this is why so many that study the Bible are saying this is probably the very last of the last days. We're probably looking at days, weeks, or months, maybe a few years to the rapture of the church. And then shortly thereafter, a world leader will come on the scene, apparently with all the answers, and will make a 7-year deal with the nation of Israel. And you'll know at that point, if you're still here, that that's the Antichrist, and that's the beginning of the last 7-year period before the second coming of Christ. And that 7-year period is the worst time in human history, according to Jesus. Daniel also said that. And Jesus added that if he didn't return at the second coming, no flesh would survive. So that period, are we on the brink of that period? It's almost certain. It's not 100% for sure. Things, ever since Israel became a nation and the World War I and World War II, there have been times where it looked like the world was on the brink of the rapture and the tribulation period, and yet here we are decades later. So these end times, after 2,000 years, to be in the very last days really meant 100+ years. So could things go on for years or even decades? Yes, it's possible. And if that's the case, then we're all going to be living in a vastly different world. And that transition is going to take place over the next few years. But what I suspect, and a lot of Bible teachers are saying this right now, is that period of darkness and chaos that is clearly coming, it's looming, we all see it, everybody's talking about it, secular or not, that is actually the Great Tribulation. This is the shadow of the Great Tribulation period that we're seeing right now. And so that we truly are in the last few moments before the rapture of the church. The rebirth of the nation Israel, which happened in 1948 and was predicted by Ezekiel hundreds of years before Christ, and multiple prophets in the Old Testament, including Moses in the first 5 books of the Bible. All of this was predicted. That is the quintessential last days sign. When you see Israel back in the land, the Messiah is coming. Now for us, 70 years or 80 years or 100 years, that seems like a long time. Oh, you said it was the last days 30 years ago. Well, in a 2,000-year time period since Christ, the last 100 years, that is the very end of the period. That's a short period of time, in comparison with the 2,000 years that's taken place since Christ. So, truly, we are in the last days. Biblically, there's no question about that. The specific timing of the rapture, no one knows. Once that takes place, and then there'll be an indeterminate period of time, probably a very short period of time, and then that deal will be made for 7 years between who will be the Antichrist, but the world will fall for him initially. Israel will accept him as their Messiah and sign that deal, and then there's no confusion for believers. The timing of the second coming is given in Daniel. Once that tribulation period has begun, it's 7 years, 360-day years. So what we don't know is when is the rapture, and when will these things unfold? And we've never been so close, and we're the world's on the precipice of the undoubtedly the greatest global upheaval and change in a systemic way. Fundamental systems are changing and will change. That's for sure. So I think it is the change, that we talk about, with a one world government, a one world financial system, and a one world false religion that everybody has to participate in. It's becomes by force. Well, we're really seeing all of this come together. So Revelation 3:10 and 11, Jesus tells the church in Philadelphia in Asia Minor, because you've kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial, which shall come upon the whole world, to test those who dwell on the earth. So, of course, the 7 letters in Revelation 2 and 3 were written to 7 specific churches, and they had application to those churches at that time. The 7 churches of Revelation also represent different types of churches and Christians throughout the entire church age. The third application is that they represent different periods, loosely, of church history. And so the last 4 churches all have a role. They're still around in the time scenario. They all have a role, and there's something specific said to each of the last 4 churches. If you look carefully, you'll find last days language in there. For example, to the church in Sardis, right before Philadelphia here in Revelation chapter 3, he says, be watchful and strengthen the things that remain that are ready to die, for I have not found your works perfect before God. Remember therefore how you have received and heard. Hold fast and repent. Therefore, if you will not watch, I will come upon you as a thief, and you won't know what hour I'll come upon you. So he's equating belief and watching for his return. We know this church is actually, they're fake Christians, because he says, I know your works, that you have a name that you are alive. These are Christians. These are Christian churches. But you are dead. If you're dead, you're not saved. You're just a Christian in name only. And the thing that he's telling them to do is to watch. And if they don't watch, he's going to come upon them as a thief. Then he tells the church in Philadelphia, who is the faithful church, he has nothing bad to say about this church because these are true believers. He tells them, because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial. The hour of trial that's coming on the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth is the 7-year tribulation period. It's the day of the Lord. It's the only thing in the Bible that it could possibly be. The day of the Lord, the judgment of God, the 70th week of Daniel, the 7-year tribulation before the second coming. That's it. That's the event. That's what he's talking about here. And so when we look at this as applying to this genuine believers, born again believers in the last days, because that's one of the applications for these 7 letters in Revelation, then we see that we are going to be kept from the tribulation period. That can only mean one thing: the rapture comes before the tribulation period. Notice that he says to persevere. So that's the first part of this encouragement, is that we are told to persevere. There's a reason why the Lord has us here, and so we have to persevere and keep our eyes on him, knowing that he's coming for us before that darkness and chaos completely envelops the world. In fact, 2 Thessalonians 2, we believe the church is the restraining force. Once the church is taken out, then all of that darkness and chaos and the Antichrist and all hell can finally break loose on the planet. Until then, the Lord is going to use us. We might have trials and difficulties. We might even have to die for our faith. But the Lord will use us. Notice that if you're living at this time, you're alive, and you're the one that Jesus is saying, I'm going to keep you from the trial that's coming on the whole world. The church he's talking to right here are true believers that are alive when the rapture takes place. And so he says, persevere, and then he says this, to those of us who know that the Lord is coming, probably very, very quickly, he says, behold, I'm coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, that no one may take your crown.